Open this. She stepped into the antique shop to shelter from the rain. The mirror in the back corner showed the shop as it had been. Different objects, a different arrangement, another era entirely. And in the reflection of the doorway behind her, the street outside as it no longer was. She asked the owner about the mirror. He looked up for the first time, said it shows what it remembers, said everything in the shop does, said she should be careful what she picks up. Don't pick up anything in any antique shop tonight that you don't know the history of. It is time for chapter 163. Old objects hold something of what they have witnessed. Most people understand this in a general sense, the particular feeling of handling something very old, the awareness that many hands have touched it before yours, that it has been present at occasions you cannot know. Most people hold this understanding loosely, as atmosphere rather than fact, but occasionally an object holds what it has witnessed in a more specific way, in a way that becomes apparent when you pick it up, or when a mirror in the back corner of a dim shop shows not what is there now, but what was there then, when the objects were newer, when the street outside looked different, when everything in the shop still remembered everything it had seen. A woman had been walking in a coastal town when the rain came in suddenly off the sea, the kind of rain that arrives without adequate warning and makes shelter an immediate priority. She stepped into the nearest doorway, an antique shop, narrow frontage, the kind of shop that occupies a space in a building that seems too small for commerce but has somehow been doing it for a very long time. Inside was dim, crowded in the particular way of a shop that has been accumulating inventory across decades without making equivalent space. The owner, an elderly man behind a low counter, glanced up when she entered and returned his attention to whatever he was examining without comment. She began to browse. The objects in the shop had the quality of things that had been there a long time. Not simply old, genuinely settled, the way objects become when they have occupied a space so long that moving them would require more explanation than leaving them. She moved carefully through the narrow spaces between shelves, picked up nothing. The owner's general air suggested this was the appropriate approach. Simply looked. The mirror was in the back corner, large, the frame dark wood, elaborately carved in a style that predated the other objects around it. She looked at her reflection, then looked at what was behind her reflection, and understood that the mirror was not showing her the shop as it currently was. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here and that you intend to find your way back. If you have a story of your own, Granny is always listening, watching, waiting. The shop in the mirror's reflection was the same shop, same dimensions, same general layout, but different. The objects on the shelves were not the objects currently there, different pieces, different arrangement. the style and character of the reflected objects belonging to an era considerably earlier than the current inventory, and the doorway behind her reflection, through which she could see the street, showed a street that did not match the street she had walked in from. Different buildings, different quality of light, different in the way of somewhere that was once this place but is no longer. She stood very still in front of the mirror for a long time, then turned to ask the owner. He was already looking at her, as though he had been waiting for this moment. Shak Koi, the attention of someone who has watched this happen before many times. The owner said the mirror showed what it remembered, said this simply as though it were a straightforward property of the object, factual, unremarkable, simply how that particular mirror worked. She asked how that was possible. He said he didn't know exactly, said most things in the shop had similar qualities to varying degrees, said objects that had been present at many occasions across many years accumulated something of those occasions, said the mirror had been in the shop longer than he had, said it had been showing the shop as it remembered for as long as he could recall, said she should be careful what she picked up, not because the objects were dangerous exactly, but because some of them remembered things that were better experienced at a slight distance. Danya, that qualification. That's right indeed. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder, what do you think the oldest object in your home remembers about everything it has witnessed? She did not pick anything up, stayed until the rain stopped, perhaps 40 minutes, during which she looked at the mirror periodically and found it consistently showing the earlier version of the shop and the street that no longer existed outside. She asked the owner as she was leaving how long the shop had been there. He said a long time. She asked if he had ever tried to find out what the mirror remembered from before the shop. He looked at the mirror, was quiet for a moment, then said he had tried once, early on, when he had first come to work here, said what the mirror showed him from before the shop had been enough to make him decide not to look again. He said this without drama, simply as a fact about a decision he had made and kept. She thanked him for the shelter, left. The rain had stopped. The street was the street she had walked in from, the buildings as they currently were. She did not look back at the shop window. I think about objects that remember. Most of us move through our lives accumulating things without considering what those things might hold of what they have witnessed. The old piece of furniture, the inherited dish, the mirror from somewhere whose history we do not know, most hold nothing that becomes apparent, simply objects, simply things. But occasionally something has witnessed enough, across enough years, enough occasions, enough of the particular accumulation that certain very old things develop, that the witnessing becomes visible. In a mirror that shows what it remembers, in an object that feels wrong in a specific way when you pick it up, in a shop where the owner has learned to tell browsers, be careful what you pick up. Danya, some things remember more than we expect. I speak from considerable experience of being an object that remembers. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you step into an antique shop to shelter from rain, look at the mirrors before you look at anything else. Not at your reflection, at what is behind your reflection. At the shop as the mirror shows it rather than as it currently is. At the street visible in the doorway behind you and whether it matches the street you came in from. And if what the mirror shows is different, if the objects on the shelves belong to an earlier era, if the street outside shows buildings that no longer stand, ask the owner. Because they will have an answer. They will have been watching people discover what the mirror does for long enough to have a simple explanation ready. And when they tell you to be careful what you pick up, listen carefully, because the objects in that shop have witnessed things across years you cannot know, and some of what they remember transfers when you pick them up on a rainy afternoon in a coastal town, looking for shelter. If this story stayed with you, if the dark or the shadow feels a little closer tonight, you know where to find me. I am always here beside the kotatsu, watching, waiting. And if you wish others to find their way here too, there is something small you can do, like and subscribe. I would not object. And if you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening.